ISIS is fighting in Iraq and Syria, and they've done something that unfortunately is brilliant. They attacked the town of Kobane. Now, the town of Kobane can be seen from Turkey. It's that close to the Turkish border. And in fact, ISIS would plant its flags on top of buildings, and you would see the ISIS black and white flag flying from the Turkish side of the border. Now, the town of Kobane is Kurdish. 20% of Turkey is Kurdish. So as the Kurds see their fellow brothers being bombarded, shot at, and taken over by ISIS, it's driving them crazy. And they're pushing the Turkish government to go inside, obviously a different country, and to go help the Kurds in Kobane, right? And the Turkish government doesn't want to do that. Now, they have some legitimate and illegitimate reasons for that. I don't know to what degree, they don't want to be pushed into a decision because the Kurds are asking them to. Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, is very prideful, right? So if there's any kind of protest, as there are now, very significant protests from the Kurds, so they're not going to make the decision for him. So that's the illegitimate part, and there are others that might be illegitimate reasons for not going in. They say their official reason is, if we're going to go in, and they have authorized the use of force in Syria and Iraq, okay, the Turkish parliament has. Well, they say, especially in Syria, they say, well, one of our objectives is to take down ISIS, but the other objective has to be to take down Assad, the current ruler of Syria, and the U.S. has not agreed to that, okay? Now, there's another legitimate reason not to go in. I mean, look at what happened when the United States went into Iraq. What are you going to do with it? You wind up in a quagmire. Let's say they helped retake Kobane, right? And right now, Kobane is half taken by ISIS. That battle is not over yet, right? Then he says, then the legitimate question is, okay, then what do we do with it, right? Well, that is a very, very good question. Okay, so now in the midst of all of that, though, these huge protests in Turkey, and a lot of Kurds are killed. I'm going to give you some of the details on that in a second. And you've now got 20% of the country that's furious at the Turkish leadership, and oftentimes at the other 80% of the country. And then the other 80% gets mad at the 20%, and oh boy, here we go. So what happened today? Turkish media had varying accounts, but the private Doğan news agency said Turkish F-16 jets hit Kurdistan Workers Party, or PKK, targets in Hakkari province near the border with Iraq on Monday. Now, that sounds like, oh, well, okay, there you go. Turkey in there now fighting a good fight, and they bomb people. No. That Hakkari province is inside Turkey. Turkey hit Turkey. ISIS has, in some ways, reignited a quasi-civil war inside Turkey. Turkey has been fighting PKK, which is a Kurdish group, which they say, and the United States says, is a terrorist organization, right? One man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter, well, round and round we go, right? But, so they'd been fighting them for 30 years, but they were in the process of making a peace deal. The last 2 years had been peaceful. Now ISIS goes and plants a couple of flags that the Turks can see and the Kurds can see. Now they're back at each other's throats, and Turkey's bombing Kurds now. Now, Turkey says, oh, that's because they hit us first. They hit a Turkish installation. A military statement said Tuesday the armed forces had responded, quote, in the strongest way to shelling by the rebels without saying whether airstrikes were launched. It appears they were launched. The Doğan news agency had a different version of events, as Associated Press explains here, saying that the military had attacked rebel fighters in the region with artillery for 3 days, forcing the PKK to retaliate by firing at a military unit. So as always in these situations, he said, she said. So PKK says, they hit us first. Turkey says, no, the Kurdish rebels hit us first. But there is a news agency here, Turkish news agency, saying, no, it was the Turkish government that hit the Kurdish rebels first, okay? So you make of that what you will. But the overall point is more important, which is mission accomplished for ISIS. They got a country that is right next to where they are, near, they have territory inside Iraq and Syria. Both of those countries have a border with Turkey. And Turkey just authorized force against ISIS. But instead of fighting ISIS, they got Turkey fighting each other. These guys are smart. I hate that they're smart, but they are smart. I wish, we could have an effective strategy against them that understood how they're trying to pit us against each other, okay? And now the U.S. is yelling at Turkey for not doing enough. Turkey's yelling at the U.S. for not getting Assad, etc. Now, meanwhile, let's go back to the protests. More than 30 people were killed last week as Kurds, angered at what they said was Turkish impediment to efforts to defend Kobane, clashed with police and supporters of an Islamist group in cities across Turkey. At least 2 police officers were among the dead, according to Turkish authorities. So some police officers apparently injured as well, but overall, the great majority of the people dead are protesters. So, look, if you're Israel or you're the Russian rebels in Ukraine, you look at an example like this, you go, wait. When Western partners or people that are, that are favored by some in the media, etc., kill protesters, there's hardly a peep, right? So when the Ukrainian government went after Russian separatists and a lot of civilians were killed, not that much talk about it, right? But when Israel kills civilians, there's a ton of talk about it. Now, of course, Israel killed thousands of civilians in the latest Gaza incursion, and Israel occupies a territory of, in essence, Gaza and certainly the West Bank, right? So I know they're all different. Ukraine is different, Israel's different, Turkey's different, right? But at the same time, there's not a lot of press about all these protesters who were killed. So there's some hypocrisy here, and ISIS has got Turkey fighting itself, and it's got all the allies fighting amongst themselves while they run roughshod through Iraq and Syria.